Dr. Larry Fleenor from Big Stone Gap. He was raised in Wise County. Born and raised there. His folks were from Bristol, and he's had a great interest in this area. He started out in public health and tuberculosis control, and then was was a general practitioner in Big Stone Gap area for 43 years. Was also a hospital administrator for 20 of those years, and he was instrumental in one of the founders of the Mountain Empire Community College. I probably don't have the right name for that. Physical therapy of Lonesome Pine Hospital. Oh, he was founder of Lonesome Pine Hospital and Big Stone Gap Clinic, and also was the director of that. And we could go on. You'll see, if I told you everything he did, you'd know why it's hard to get an appointment. But the main thing we're interested in is he was one of the founders of the Daniel Boone Wilderness Trail Association, and he's written a book about it and several other books about the history of the area and articles. And I'm going to leave all the rest for you, Dr. Fleenor. You'll come on up. Give you plenty of time to do your homework.
Thank you for the gracious invitation to speak to you fine folks. I've been looking forward to it for a long time. Could I ask how my voice is projecting? Too loud, just about right? If I fade out, start waving your arms or something in the air. I think most people, and certainly this group here, who's a self-selected group of historians, have spent some time wondering about the world that brought their parents together and resulted in their coming into the world. Communities are the same way. Thank you. Communities were conceived and given birth in the context of a certain environment. And just like you wondered about what led to your parents coming together and what historic trends brought them together, we're going to be talking about what led to the development of Kingsport, the world as it existed that was about to conceive and give birth to Kingsport. And I'm going to enlarge that to the greater Holston Valley, because we are really one community and share one background. We're going to be using as a window to look into that issue of what the world was like that was getting ready to give birth to Holston Valley. That window will be a single day's entry in a land surveyor's record book. It's called the Woods River Land Entry Book, and it was kept by a Colonel John Buchanan, and the date of entry is October the 16th, 1745. Now, it's a very short entry, 3 or 4 sentences. I'm going to read it through without explanation, and then we'll drop back and take each one of the terms offered in this entry one at a time and define them and give the background behind it. And by the time we have done that, we will hopefully have recreated the world that was about ready to give birth to us here in the Holston Valley. Am I still projecting all right? Okay. Woods River, by the way, is the original name for the New River. New River, as you will recall, is the river that flows up through Radford and Blacksburg and out north through the Narrows in Virginia. Okay. Now, this is a very confusing statement, which is the reason I chose it to talk about, because it's not only such a wonderful window into the subject, but it's so confusing, it's fun to dissect it. But part of the problem with understanding it is that Buchanan wrote it, but he wrote it in the third person. Buchanan rode on to William Mack's place at present Mack's Meadows. Mack was probably from the noted Mack milling family in Thriesheim, Germany, whose father, Jost Mack, founded the German River Baptist, or parentheses, Dunkard faith. Buchanan found Mack dead in his cabin, but with him were several Longbeards, or Siebentanger, from Ephrata Cloister, Lancaster County, Pennsylvania. Newly arrived, they would build a settlement called Manhanium. The next day, Buchanan, with Adam and Jacob Harmon, appraised Mack's estate, agreeing with the Longbeards to gather the crops. That's the end of the statement. Now, let's go back and start at the beginning. First of all, Mack's Meadows. This is Mack's Meadows. You all have passed the sign that says to the turn off to Mack's Meadows 1,000 times if you've gone up northeast on Interstate 81. This is Mack's Meadows right here. There's nothing there today, and there never has been, except that it is a historic intersection of Indian and Pioneer trails. There are two different versions of the Wilderness Road, or the Great Warriors Path, that diverge here. This road up here is Pepper's Ferry Road. I'll be showing you where that originates up in Radford and Blacksburg in a few minutes. But remember, when I call your attention back to this place, this is Pepper's Ferry. Pepper's Ferry was one of the several ferries that forded the New River between Blacksburg and Radford. And right over in here off the map is the town of Wytheville. And Wytheville's reason for existence is these two versions of the Wilderness Road, the Great Warriors Path, came together at Wytheville. Now this Interstate 81, really US 11 is a better description of the Great Warriors Path, the main version of it. And you can see it comes here and comes over to Wytheville and joins the Pepper's Ferry route. Now you'll see coming south off of this Pepper's Ferry Road, this road right here, which is important because it goes to the lead mines at Austinville. The lead mines were very important. The Revolutionary War and the Civil War would have been impossible except for the lead that came out of the lead mines. And on down here is the Old Salem. Old Salem is the original name for Winston-Salem. We'll be talking about that and showing you. So this is the intersection between the Wilderness Road that goes east and west in Virginia, and the road that drops off and goes into the Yadkin Valley of North Carolina, which is the guts of that state. Raleigh-Durham and Winston-Salem are there. We'll be talking about that at greater length. And let's see if I can work this gadget. Is there someone who knows how to douse these front lights? I was told there was. We tried that and it does help. It does help a great deal. Thank you. Is that all right with you folks?
Yeah.
Now, back to Colonel John Buchanan himself. He's a fellow who was keeping this record book. He was a chief surveyor for two very prominent land companies, the Loyal Land Company and the Patton Land Company. The Patton was his father-in-law. Now, back in the early 1740s, King George II became very concerned about the French coming down the Ohio River and claiming everything that drained into the Mississippi River for France. That comes closer to home than you may realize, because the French Broad River was named that because there was a French outpost there. There was a French trading post and military post at Nashville, which was called French Lick, and they claimed the entire New River Valley, which goes all the way from the Narrows south toward Boone, North Carolina. So they claimed the Tennessee River. They claimed right where we're sitting, and they were making good progress toward taking it all. So King George says the way we're going to combat this is we're going to get that country settled with Brits before the French can get there. And in order to do this, he set up two main land companies to sell this land. The first was the Ohio Company, which had great influence, and it exercised its business up on the Kanawha River around Charleston, West Virginia. George Washington was intensely involved in that endeavor. And for the Valley of Virginia, this side of Lexington and Kingsport at that time, due to a surveying era, was thought to be in Virginia. In fact, all the way down to Sevierville, John Sevier in Sevierville got his land grants from Virginia. So, in that context, he set up a land company called the Loyal Land Company, which belonged to a man who's variously described as either Borden or Burden. And I think the issue revolves around whether the vowel in the middle of his name was some U that somebody forgot to close or was really an O. The older histories refer to him as Borden, the newer ones refer to him as Burden. Now, if any of you are familiar with King Carter, he was the most influential man and the wealthiest man in colonial Virginia. And he managed the northern neck, that section of land between the Potomac and Rappahannock River. And Borden was manager in between two spells where King Carter was manager. So that's who he was. Now, the first people in the Valley of Virginia were the German Mennonites and Brethren. They bought the entire Rockingham County, which is around Harrisonburg. They're still there. The Eastern Mennonite College is the Mennonite college for the entire world. Certainly the United States is there. And they settled there just before the Scots-Irish got there. Now, there was a man named Beverly who had good connections with the royal family, who was given or bought a place that he called Beverly Manor. And you're looking at it, if you look at the violet or purple line, that's the outline of Augusta County, and right in the center of it is Stanton. So that'll give you some orientation of where you are. But Beverly Manor is this outlined here in black with Stanton in the middle. That is called usually the Irish Tract because that's where all the Scotch-Irish settled and came from. And it consisted of 118,491 acres. Now, contrary to popular history, these folks by and large did not come down from Philadelphia and Pennsylvania. They were brought in to Rob's Hole, the name that's been pretty well forgotten, and its current name is Tappahannock, Virginia. It was at that time, according to the ships of that era, the head of navigation on the Rappahannock. And we'll be looking at a map of that later, and I'll call your attention to it. But at Rob's Hole. And the fellow who did all this was a sea captain named James Patton. He was Scots-Irish from Northern Ireland, and you can see him referred to in local histories either as captain, as sea captain, or he became a colonel in the local militia. Now, this was James Patton. Now, he made himself wealthy. He would bring over Scots-Irish indentures who paid for passage and dump them out at Rob's Hole and take back a cargo of furs and tobacco back to Ireland and sell that and take home, back to Rob's Hole more immigrants, more indentured servants. Made himself wealthy. And finally, he was bringing in so many folks that Beverly offered him a fourth of Beverly Manor, or the Irish Tract, for bringing in these Irish immigrants. Now, Patton's daughter married Colonel John Buchanan. It's a very tight-knit group of people, and everybody that I'm going to mention in connection with this Irish Tract, you'll recognize the surname as being a mover and shaker in the Holston Valley. starting out in Saltville, coming through Abington and Bristol to Kingsport. Now it gets very confusing because Colonel James Patton became manager of both the Loyal Company and his own land company, the Patton Land Company. And if you were to look through all the land patents and land grants for Virginia, which are available online through the Library of Virginia, you can download them. You can't tell whether somebody was buying land from the Patton Land Company or from the Loyal Land Company. It just gets very confusing. But they were the greatest sellers of land up and down Interstate 81, the Valley of Virginia, all the way from Lexington to Kingsport. The westernmost plot of land that I know that belonged to Patton is just north and south of the Bass Pro Shop up at Bristol. If you all know where Deck Valley is, that was a Patton land grant. He also owned most of Bristol, Tennessee, where Keene College is. That's all Patton. Now, James Patton settled, he also owned Chilhowie, by the way, and he settled in right in the middle of the Virginia Tech campus. If any of you went there and know where the duck pond is, and the drill field, the quadrangle, that was where Colonel Patton lived and where he was killed by Indians. I'm getting ahead of myself. Now, the year has moved up to 1745, and all these land companies have been incorporated, and they've got all their management in place, and Colonel John Buchanan is the surveyor, but he's also the man on the ground who actually is running things. Patton was the nominal manager, but Buchanan, his son-in-law, was the fellow who ran things. And he was surprised to find out that all this land down here was already occupied. People were in here a long time before the history books say they were. The oldest date I know of is carved and chiseled into the rock of the Garrison Rock House on top of Black Mountain, which is the mountain that separates Kentucky from Virginia, and it's 1738. That's a decade before the first recorded European came to Kingsport. So he found out that all these folks were in here, and he was going to have to tell them they were going to have to move or buy their land. And he was shocked to find out another thing, and that is that if he was going to talk to these people who were sitting on his land, he was going to have a German translator. Well, that kind of blows people's minds, but it happens to be the fact. Is anybody here from Virginia Tech? I thought there might be a few Hokies around here. You can throw rocks at me if you want to. Do you recognize that map? This is the New River Valley as it passes through Radford, Christiansburg, and Blacksburg. And you will note this place right here, that's the Horseshoe Bend. Can you all still hear me? And right over here is Virginia Tech campus. And this Horseshoe Bend is where the Radford Arsenal is. Now, in order to get some German translators, he stopped here, and living inside this horseshoe were two brothers, Adam and Jacob. We call them Harmons. Do any of you folks from Virginia Tech remember Harmon's mink farm? It was on the northeast end of Radford.
Yeah.
Bless your heart,
Oh.
I'm not alone in the world. There's another one.
There's a Harmon in our class.
Well, those folks were originally Hermans, Hermann in German. And they spoke English and German. Apparently he was a very educated and knowledgeable man. And all this information you find about in this land entry from Buchanan. Buchanan was Scotch-Irish. He didn't know anything about all this business. But this came directly from the Harmons. The Harmons are interesting people. We could talk about them at length. But at any rate, he picked up Adam and Jacob Harmon and used them as their translators, and it's all this information we're going to be talking about today obviously came from these folks. Now we're going to be talking about some interesting history that is very relevant to everybody in this room, and probably next to nobody here knows anything about it. Now, if you remember, the land entry record mentioned a Yost. In English should be pronounced Mac. In German it's Mach, and that's important. The German pronunciation is important. And if you were to look up in Google or the Encyclopedia Britannica on this gentleman, he would be listed as Alexander Mach, and we'll be talking about that issue also. But at any rate, and he mentioned that this fellow, Alexander or Yost Mack, was from a famous milling family from Srisheim, Germany, and was the founder of the Dunkard faith, or the Brethren. These folks spoke a dialect, an old dialect of German called Middle High Dutch, Middle High German. It's still spoken up around Harrisonburg. It's the language spoken by the Amish in Pennsylvania. It's also very closely related to Yiddish. And believe it or not, there's a Church of the Brethren that conducted religious services in Middle High German up above Mendota up until World War I, when all of a sudden they forgot that they existed and started speaking English. But this is Yost Mach, and he's a very important figure for us historically. He founded the Brethren, or the Dunkards. Now in Mittelhochdeutsch, Middle High German, the word that's in modern German is the D has changed to a T, and like Dunkin' Donuts, you dunk your donut in the coffee or the hot chocolate. That has religious significance. I don't know how many of you are as old as I am, but when people got baptized in the creek, they were dunked. And you try to use that word on your English cousins, they won't know what you're saying because it's not English. It's Middle High German / American. But in modern German, the word has changed from dunken to tunken. But in America, it's forever frozen as dunk. And the German Brethren, some of them believed in baptism by sprinkling like a Methodist, and some of them total immersion, and they would call themselves, and everybody else called them, Dunkards. There is still a congregation of Dunkards in Roanoke, and their cultural hallmark is grape pie. So they're still around. But at any rate, the wars of the Reformation went on for several hundred years, and it destroyed Central Europe. And the last really great war in this collection was the 30 Years' War. The 30 Years' War killed 85% of the civilian population of Srisheim. Now let me call that up. Up here on this red flag is the town of Srisheim. 85% of the people were killed in the 30 Years' War. Those 15% that were left breathing says, we ain't going to do this again, never no more. They formed their own religion, the Brethren, and it had several tenets. One of it is they were pacifists. They came to America, and if an Indian raised a tomahawk to hit them on the head, they would not even raise their arm to deflect the blow. That's how much of a pacifist they were. The other thing they said that all these terrible things that have happened to us are due to state religions, due to countries having established religions. So we are against established religions. Those are their two major tenets. And this area here from Srisheim down to Strasbourg Now, I say that Strasbourg to call attention to the fact that it was originally German. And in the 30 Years' War, it was captured by the French, and the spelling and pronunciation went from Strasbourg to Strasbourg. But this is the Rhine River Valley, and it's only about 50 miles from Strasbourg to Heidelberg. And it's an area about twice the size of Sullivan County. Yet there were 30,000 Germans gave up on Europe and moved to Philadelphia, and then came down the Valley of Virginia, came down the Wilderness Road, Great Warriors Path, US 11, Interstate 81, any incarnation of that route that you know of. But they wound up in the Great Valley of Virginia. Alexander Mack, or Yost Mack, led a group who came to Philadelphia. And they set up a religious commune right there where the cursor is at Ephrata. Now that was mentioned in this land entry record. I just went right through it. You probably didn't notice it. But to give you some orientation, this is the Susquehanna River. This is Interstate 81. This is Harrisburg. Right here is Hershey, where all the candy bars come from. And over here off where that cursor is in that general area is Philadelphia. And at this point, Interstate 81 more or less becomes the Wilderness Road that leads us directly to Kingsport. So that's where Ephrata Cloister was. Now that currently is a Pennsylvania state park, and that is Ephrata Cloister, the original buildings where all these brethren or Dunkards from Thriesheim first came to settle. Now Yost, or Alexander Yost Mack Sr. died, and they got into a fight over succession, who was going to succeed him as leader of the brethren. And some of them says, you know, we left Europe to get away from controversy and fighting and infighting. We're leaving. We're getting out of this place. We don't want to fight. So Alexander Yost Mack Jr. led a bunch of them off into, quote, the wilderness. The wilderness turned out to be right there. Now you Hokies will recognize that as Claytor Lake. It's interesting that Ephrata in Pennsylvania and Claytor Lake are both state parks. These brethren moved from one state park to another, but this was in the wilderness. And there's no joke about it. Now, this is VPI, and Christiansburg, Radford. Up here is the Narrows, and all these black lines are Indian, what happened? Are Indian trails. They're all different versions of the Wilderness Road. There's the Great Warriors Path. This is Interstate 81, which is, we think of as the route, but there are other routes. This up here is the Seneca Trail, which comes from Buffalo, New York. And this one here is Craig's Creek. It was very important. It goes right through Parisburg, and if you keep on going, it comes out in the North Fork of the Holston at Saltville. Now that's very important. The North Fork of the Holston was almost entirely settled by these Germans. They're cheek-to-jaw Germans to this day, and if the surname doesn't look German, it's probably been changed on purpose. And this is the way that Colonel Buchanan came. This is the Catawba Creek Trail. It starts at Fincastle, which in the old days functionally was Roanoke. Roanoke was built by the railroads, and before Roanoke there was Fincastle. Fincastle was the road hub for that part of the world. And this is Catawba Creek, and it gradually crosses over into the North Fork of the Roanoke River. And I don't have it marked. It's a shame because the road goes right through here and goes through the VPI campus, crosses right through the quadrangle, the drill field, where Patton lived and was killed by Indians, and comes down. This is the Peppers Ferry Road. Remember I told you I was going to ask you to remember the Peppers Ferry Road. This is the Peppers Ferry Road. And right here is Peppers Ferry, and it crosses through here through Dublin and comes back into that map where I showed you. It comes into the north, comes into Max Meadows. Now this is a regular wilderness road, and it crosses the New River at Ingalls Ferry. Remember Mary Ingalls, who was kidnapped by the Indians and walked back a long way home? Now, if you haven't figured it out, MAX, as in Max Meadows, is really Mach. This is William Mach, who was lying dead in his bed in Max Meadows. Max is another way that Mach got transliterated into an English American surname. We'll run across others here shortly. Now, this place right here, under Claytor Lake, was originally called Cherokee Bottom. When the brethren got there, and this is a direct quote from one of the brethren who settled, it says, they found there a kind of white people who wore deer skins, lived by hunting, and associated with the Indians and acted like savages. Now, Cherokee Bottom rapidly became known as Dunkard's Bottom. This whole area here under the lake and all the way back through here is Dunkard's Bottom. This is a modern map of the area. This is Interstate 81. This is the New River going north. This is the Little River, which starts to the south of Roanoke, and it was the old Indian Pioneer Trail to Southside Virginia, or Bedford, Appomattox, that area. Manhattanum, which was what the Dunkards called this place, is an Old Testament word that means the juncture of two rivers. So here's your two rivers, the New River and the Little River. And this series of black lines here represents the different versions of crossing the New River at Ingalls Ferry. This is the Wilderness Road. It comes down south of Radford College or University. And this series of shoals you can see here in the river was the ford. That's the ford where they crossed the New River on the Wilderness Road. And the Ingalls, after Mary Ingalls came back from captivity, she and her husband built a ferry which bypassed this, and the ferry was right here. And that's Ingalls Ferry. And later in their lives, they built a toll-covered bridge, which was just downstream 50 yards, right there where the cursor is. That bridge was finally burned down by the Union troops in the Civil War. The pilings are still there. You can see the rock approaches on both sides. Readily available. You can drive there and walk on it. You can see where the ford was. You can see the bridge. And there's an inn. The Ingalls wanted everything that made money. And there's a log cabin right there, still standing, still occupied. There was an Ingalls Ferry Inn. So this is Dunkard's Bottom. This whole area from here down into the lake was Dunkard's Bottom. Now, the most tantalizing term in this land entry record that I read to you, and it was the topic of the discussion today, was the term Siebentanger. Siebentanger. Now that's inscrutable, but it's German. And Sieben simply is the German word for seven. That's all it is. Tanger means a man from Tangier. 7 men from Tangier. So when Colonel Buchanan came to William Mack and found him dead in his bed, there were 7 brethren there who he identified otherwise as men from Ephrata and men from Tangier. The long beards, these folks never shaved. Their beards grew as long as they lived. And this is fascinating because even though we right here haven't got a clue who a Tanger was, apparently Buchanan knew that everybody in Virginia would know immediately who a Longbeard was, who a Dunkard was, and who a Tanger was, or Tanger in German. Now that's fascinating that people in 1745 would know that and we haven't got a clue. But it's a fact of the matter. Now, what is the reference to Tangier. The term does not differentiate between Tangier, Morocco. This is Crater Lake, the dam, and Dunkard's Bottom, and all this area where the park is and under the lake is all Dunkard's Bottom. Now, Sieben-Tonger doesn't tell you where Tongue was. There are two of them. One is a town in Morocco, northwest Africa. And the other is Tangier Island, right here in the Chesapeake Bay, right there where the cursor is in that red dot. Now, this is a fascinating part of the talk, because nobody has got a clue that there's a connection between an island in Virginia's Chesapeake Bay and the city in northwest Africa. And the connection is the Spanish Inquisition. If you remember, in the year 1711, the Berbers from Tangier, Morocco were asked by warring factions within a civil war in Spain to come over and help out in their civil war. And these Muslim Berbers are Caucasians, by the way. They're not Negro, they're Caucasian. But these Muslim Berbers went into Spain and won the Civil War, but then just took over the place. They won it and they kept it. But in 1492, the year Columbus sailed for America, the Christian Spaniards finally succeeded in conquering the Muslim Spaniards, the Berbers. And they started the Inquisition. They took all the men and all the women over menopause and took them out in the ocean on ships and threw them overboard. They took the women who were still of sexuality, to put it bluntly, and all the children, and told them that they had a choice of taking a boat ride or of converting to Christianity. And they converted, and the term is convergio. And after a while, the Spanish Christians became very uncomfortable with these folks because they continued to practice in secret the Mohammedan faith. And they said, well, we can't have this. So they sold them all into slavery, or if they really liked them, they had close family connections, they allowed them to become soldiers and colonists in the Spanish Empire. Now, the capital of Spanish Florida was Paris Island, which may blow your mind. That's getting awful close to home. Paris Island is right on the border between North Carolina and South Carolina. And the Spanish established a series of forts/colonies all the way from Paris Island to Chota, where the little Tennessee River comes into Tennessee 30 miles southeast of Knoxville. That's the capital of the Overhill Cherokee. The main one of these forts was Morganton, North Carolina. Now, the process was, the Spanish had created a problem. They had all these excess women because they killed all the men. So they sent one convergio man into North Carolina, just south of the Tennessee-Virginia line. And they sent him with one legal wife and 5 female servants. 1 man, 6 women in the wilderness. Now, you know what happened. That 1 man kept all 6 women reproducing at maximum capacity. And all of a sudden, you got a lot of Spanish/Berbers on the Tennessee-Virginia line. And if you're wondering who these white savages were that dressed in skins and interacted with the Indians and that they found on Dunkard's Bottom, that's who these folks were. They're still here. And that's the point of this whole story. Now, Tangier Island became a refuge for these folks who had been driven out of Europe by Catholics. Now, there were other groups who had been driven out of Europe by Catholics, including the Brethren. And the other were the French Huguenots. Now, the French Huguenots and the German Brethren came together in Alsace, which is where Strasbourg is. Remember Strasbourg? I showed you a Strasbourg. They were run out. So these 3 groups of people who disliked Catholics intensely came and settled on Tangier Island 100 years before the official histories of Virginia tell you that it was ever inhabited. The official histories of Virginia will tell you that Tangier Island was settled by the English from Jamestown in approximately 1650. But it was settled by these folks, three groups, who the Spanish call the Picaroons. Now, you probably never heard of the Picaroons, but Picaroons were pirates, and they preyed on the wealthiest Catholic in the world, who was the King of Spain. The Spanish were stealing all this gold and silver from the Incas and Aztecs and were putting it on galleys and bringing it up the coast of the United States, Virginia, North Carolina, until they hit Long Island. And when they got to Long Island, they knew where they were. They immediately set their compass due east, which would take them to Spain. So these Spanish treasure galleys were coming by the mouth of the Chesapeake Bay, and these Picaroons played on them. And the Mexicans still teach their school children about these terrible, terrible Picaroons. We never heard of them. They're our ancestors. Now, to get going real fast, I'm about to run out of time. We know about these people primarily because they're so inbred that they've got a number of genetic diseases, including Tangier disease. Don't worry what it is, but it's a pediatric disease. Kids get it and they die. There's only been about 100 cases diagnosed worldwide, and most of them wind up at the University of Virginia, where I happen to train. Now, there's a related disease called maple syrup urine disease, which is in the same group of people and is the same normal gene which comes from Harrisonburg up in the Mennonite country in Virginia, and it winds up in Charlottesville at the University of Virginia also. Now, you make a scattergram of Tangier disease, which means you plot on a map where these cases were diagnosed, and it's interesting. Almost all of them are diagnosed around Tangier Island. There are a few of them in Central Europe. Well, it's got a story there, but the rest of them are spread out down the Wilderness Road to the Midwest. Now, we last hear of these Picaroons in the Revolutionary War. General Dunmore, Governor Dunmore was the last royal governor of the colony of Virginia, and the rebels in Virginia ran him out. Those of you who have been to Colonial Williamsburg will remember the parade ground in the center of Colonial Williamsburg. There's a big powder magazine there. Dunmore stole all the Virginia's powder, got on a British man of war, went to Norfolk, which was the largest town in Virginia, burned it down to the ground. And the last entry in Virginia history about the Picaroons is Dunmore went off and joined the Picaroons. The Picaroons were loyalists. They used Tangier Island as a means of raiding rebel shipping. And the last you hear of them is that the colony of Maryland and the colony of Virginia formed a common fleet. And in the largest naval engagement, you never heard of it, the largest naval engagement, the Revolutionary War, Virginia and Maryland cleaned out the Picaroons from Tangier Island. And they all went to Indiana and Ohio. They're still there in places called Morocco, Ohio, Tangier, Ohio, and Tangier, Indiana, and they're surrounded by churches of the Brethren. I mean, the story is just too good to be true, but there it is. Oh, I'm about to run out of time. So much to talk about. Let's go real fast to one last thing and we'll stop for questions. This is a map. This is Interstate 81 in Virginia. This is Withful. Right here is Max Meadows. Or this is Claytor Lake and Dunkard's Bottom. This is Winston-Salem. Now, during the French and Indian War, the Shawnee from Ohio raided the VPI campus, Draper's Meadow. And among other things, they captured Mary Ingalls and took her back to Ohio, and they killed Colonel Patton right in the Tech campus. And the Dunkard says, we're pacifists. We left Europe to get away from this kind of goings on. So they pulled up stake and formed a new colony down here in the Yadkin Valley, which they called Old Salem, which is now Winston-Salem. And you'll find an interesting place right here, which is called Moxville. If you were to take a wild speculation and say that that was really Mach or Mac, you'd be right. Moxville was settled by William Yost Mach Jr., and that name has been transliterated into American English not only as Max, M-A-X, but also as Malk, spelled half a dozen very ingenious ways, M-A-U-K, M-A-U-C-K, M-A-W-K, and Southwest Virginia and East Tennessee are full of these folks. That's where they came from. You'll also see an interesting place here on US 421, which runs from Winston-Salem to Bristol. You'll see Moravian Falls. The Moravians are another of these group of German pietists. They're basically the same as the Mennonites and the Amish and the Hutterites, etc. So this whole area was settled by these folks. Now the fellow that I want to call your attention to lived up here with his parents in Dunker's Bottom. His name was Christian in English. The Germans would pronounce it Christian. And they got up and left, and when the French and Indian War started, and they came to Winston-Salem. Now something happened, nobody knows what, but they turned from being a pacifist. William Christian Jr. moved back to Dunker's Bottom. His foundation of his house is still there. And during the Great Cherokee War of 1776, which started with the Battle of Long Island Flats, and the people all got run out of the Holston Valley, particularly the folks from under South Holston Lake, and they went to Black's Fort in Abington, and they holed up there under siege all summer and half the fall, and every time one of them would stick their head out, they'd get killed. And the Holston militia was completely neutered, completely rendered impotent by the Indians. And they were saved by the New River militia under the command of this former pacifist, Colonel William Christian, who marched down the Wilderness Road, allowed the Holston militia to come out of their holes in the forts, and together they came to the headwaters of navigation on the Holston River in front of the Netherland Inn at Kingsport, which it was a port, and they built flatboats and bateaux, which was dugout canoes, and they sailed down the Holston and Tennessee River to the Smokies, and they cleaned out the Cherokee in 1776. That's the connection. So, in quick summary, what I have done, tried to do, is to, number one, tell you what the world was like that gave birth to Kingsport. I also have introduced you to the three main ethnic groups that form the population here. Now, the first I'll call the Berbers, Spanish, call them anything else you want to. They were here approximately 1584, something like that, approximately. The next group were the Germans, who came in to Harrisonburg at the Mennonite settlement up there. And then thirdly, the Scotch-Irish came into Beverly Manor at Stanton, the Irish tract, and everybody you ever heard of, and see if I can name some of them. The Campbells, William Campbell was the father of Saltville. He was the father of, that was Charles Campbell. William Campbell was the fellow who was head of the Holston militia at the Battle of Kings Mountain. His daughter married, Colonel John Buchanan's daughter married Preston. Preston is another one of these birds from Beverly Manor. All these folks are from Beverly Manor. And her name was Sarah Buchanan Campbell Preston. And her home is a Martha Washington Inn. James King was the brother of the king who ran the salt works. They belonged to Preston, but Preston was off being general in the War of 1812 and governor of Virginia. King actually ran the salt works, and it was James King who started the iron works in Bristol and who brought his iron bars to float them down the Tennessee River here to Kingsport, The Steel Creek Park in Bristol is where his steel was made. King College is named after him. The King Community Center in Abington is named after him. Lewis Preston Summers, who wrote the history of Washington County and Southwest Virginia, is descended from every one of these families. And it goes on and on and on and on. These folks all came from the Irish tract and all led to the founding of the Tri-Cities. So you're three ethnic groups, and the political winds that started in Europe, the wars of the Reformation, the 30 Years' War, the French and Indian War, the Revolutionary War, all led to the founding of Kingsport. Now I will quit and I will answer questions officially until 11 o'clock, at which time I'm told that we're supposed to end. I will stay as long as anybody wants to talk. I have a website which is full of essays, articles, and 2 complete books. If you can remember that I'm from Big Stone Gap, and just Google Big Stone Gap Publishing, because I do publish. There are 2 books. One is a history of Saltville, which talks all about these Campbells and the Kings, and the other is the Stuarts, which drops over from Saltville over to Elk Garden in Virginia, and it tells you all about the Civil War and the largest ranch east of the Mississippi and the great political struggles of that era. And there are probably 20 or 30 different essays. I have books over here for sale. I will stop at this point for questions. I want to thank you earnestly. You've been a very attentive audience, and I'll do my best to answer questions.
One question about Patton. Is that P-A-T-T-O-N, like General George Patton?
P-A-T-T-O-N.
I assume the Melungeons have nothing to do with the Berbers?
Not a thing in the world, just a more polite name. People get all hysterical if you say Melungeon, so I don't say Melungeon, I say Berbers. The oldest ethnic group in
So
Kingsport.
it is the same?
Yes, sir.
Okay.
They're both Arabic words. You can read all kinds of nonsense, but I've got contacts, very educated upper crust people from Tangier. And the Arabs came across North Africa and they heard these people speaking, and they said they're making a burr, 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 burr. It's the way their speech sounds. They became Berbers. And the Arabic word for mixture turns out in French is Malang, and I don't speak French or Arabic, but it comes out in Southwest Virginia, East Tennessee as Melungeon. But it's Arabic for mixture because these folks were a mixture of the oldest ethnic group in Europe, plus Germans. The German Vandals came down and settled in Carthage, conquered Carthage, and they intermarried with the Berbers, so the Melungeons are partly dark Spanish and partly German. That's the reason you'll find blonde, blue-eyed Melungeons and dark Melungeon.
The United Methodist, go back to United Brethren, are they an offshoot of the Church of the Brethren? And then the United Brethren merged with Methodists, that's when they became United Methodists. That
You're awfully close. The Germans, when they came over here, did their best to become English. Now that is their term, become English. They changed the spelling of their names. Bowers became farmers, Snyders became tailors, Schaefers became shepherds. Country, Sullivan County and Washington County is full of folks like that, my family among them. But they changed religion, particularly with World War I. They became usually Methodists or Baptists. The Baptists were the Dunkards, and the Methodists were the Sprinklers. Now the churches on Tangier Island today they're either Methodist or Baptist. Nobody else is there. And those folks will tell you that they're all descended from the Brethren. So the Methodist Church started philosophically and theologically by associating with Brethren in Europe. But they came here and just as simple Methodists, quarter of a century ago or so, they united with the United Brethren and became the United Methodist Church. So you're exactly right. Time's over. I'll stay as long as anybody wants to talk. I appreciate your all's attention and good questions, and I hope you enjoyed it. Thank you.
We really did. You know, what makes that so interesting is we've had lots of speakers here that have given us a history of this area beyond where you reached. So it really tied ancestry before, you know, we know all about the kings and the flatboats and things like that, but no one has ever come here and gone back that far and told us how it got here so clearly, and we certainly appreciate it.
Thank you.
And, are there any announcements?